So welcome everyone and welcome to the challenge final round. And today we have a fireside chat with Abe Minkara. Just to give you a quick introduction for Abe Minkara. Abe Minkara is a chief investment officer and founding partner at LegacyNet. Prior to that, Abe managed the portfolio of investments at Mark Cuban's company with a focus on technology, logistics, and consumer good products. So without further ado, let's jump to the questions and let's learn from from Abe today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So great. So, let's just start with a quick questions. Could you tell us a little bit more about your background and your journey to founding LegacyNet?
Sure. Yeah. So I have a background in technology initially as part of the team that launched Verizon.com in 2000. This is way back. And then I've had some entrepreneurial ventures that led me to, through my journey, to work with Mark Cuban, worked with Mark for almost 7 years, helping kind of manage the support, the portfolio of direct investments. We saw a lot of technology and we saw a lot of consumer products, obviously, because of Shark Tank. So everything that you see on the show actually happens, and these are actual investments. There's a real exchange of money for equity. And then we, as Mark Cuban Companies, were very hands-on with the company, with each of the investments, and we provided a lot of support as investors. So we were value investors on that side. And then more recently, with my partner, we co-founded LegacyNet, which is a multifamily office. We have 14 founding families, and we are a family office of family offices. So if the Cuban Companies was one family office, this is a combination of 14. And we have, as the LegacyNet business, we have an advisory arm where we act as the family office professionals for the family, and we have an investment arm where we source deals for our families. And because we're set up as a multifamily office, one of the fun parts is if we have a large allocation into a deal, we can have our families anchor that deal, and we can bring in outside investors in our network to co-invest alongside us in those deals.
Wow. Yeah, wow, that's great. I'm just curious, how big are usually the deal that you made through LegacyNet?
So with Legacy, well, how about I tell you more about like our investment philosophy? Basically, what's interesting in the family office world, there's a saying, if you know one family office, you know one family office, because every family office has a very unique perspective on risk and on kind of portfolio strategy, on industries they have a preference to, and industries they understand better than others, industries they just don't want to have anything to do with. They all have some have embedded businesses within their family office, and some are completely kind of functioning as kind of a high-level advisory for the family or for generations of that family. So it comes in many different shapes and in structures. In our case, we've created a multifamily where we see ourselves as providing value for families that want access to professional family office professionals without necessarily having to internally hire a whole team, but also have access to a network where you can kind of exchange knowledge through a network of families and co-invest alongside other families, there's a lot of value there. It's almost like you're sharing the diligence across a number of investors and collaborating and allocating capital as a team. Now, because there's a number of families, the scope is more broad on what we invest in. And so we've looked at internally, our high level strategy is something we've coined as a term, the Entrepreneurial Endowment Model, which is a portfolio strategy that we've kind of internally mapped that is very similar to kind of what the top endowment models have created as a portfolio strategy. And if you've looked at the historical performance of the top endowment models versus the S&P, they've always outperformed. And if you look at what their portfolio mix is, it's not your traditional 60-40 equity bonds mix that kind of is the more kind of plain vanilla portfolio. It's heavy on the alternatives. So alternative investments could be a combination of different types of deals. Could be would include hedge funds, would include private equity, would include real estate, would include venture capital. So that's part of our strategy, is to invest in some of the top managers out there that have had performance history because they have a certain discipline, they have a focus, and they have a team, and they know how to identify opportunities, and they know how to they know how to work with kind of their LPs, make sure they are getting a return on their investment. And each one of those strategies has a certain time period from an investor's perspective on return on capital. Some are more long-term. There's also some other strategies that have a more of a current yield return. So we have a family that doesn't care about like they would like an 18x or more on an opportunity, but to them, say they'd rather not take the risk involved with getting, let's say, a 5-10x multiple, and they would rather get a 10 to 15% quarterly distribution, especially in today's world of uncertainty. So there's so many different strategies out there, and there's a lot of teams and managers that are doing a great job, and it's a matter of investing in those managers. Now, what we do in addition to that is also invest in direct deals, right? Now, since we have a lot of entrepreneurs on the call, when I was with Mark Cuban, we invested in entrepreneurs and startups a lot. In my current role at Legacy Knight, we also invest in startups, but we invest at a growth stage. So we kind of take on what we call valuation risk versus the company risk that you get at a seed Series A. We internally come in more at a late Series B or a Series C stage. Now that doesn't mean we don't make exceptions. I think if we see a solid company that is raising a Series A, we like the sector, the entrepreneur and team, and the traction that they currently have. Preferably, it comes in revenue, and there's a clear path to profitability, and it meets a lot of the requirements that we look for at a growth stage, and we could potentially make an exception and invest at an earlier stage. But where we can capture that is, and you see that in family offices, typically don't invest much in early stage. There's families who do it. In our stage, we're more in the general category of family offices that do more growth. But here's how we capture early stage, and there's a way to it. So we would invest in early stage VCs, and those VCs, we would pick the best VCs in different industries, and by partnering and becoming an LP in that VC, you are working with a manager that's kind of doing their job and picking the best of the best. Now, what happens is over time, those early stage investments they have eventually go through a Series A or Series B or Series C. And if you're already part of an investor in that VC, they'll give you opportunities to co-invest alongside in that growth stages, right?
Yep.
And so that's one way to invest early, almost like a VC feeder fund, and eventually over time do larger allocations at a growth stage. And then there's some other VCs that create vehicles specifically to invest in their kind of vintage fund. Those are kind of the larger players where they'd create a growth fund and raise more capital so to invest in some of their winners that have gone through several growth stages. So that's kind of some of the strategies that we have in place internally. And so far in the last year, we've invested in almost every one of those categories I've mentioned. We've done VCs, private equity. We've done directs. We've done we've done an early stage tech at a Series C. We have done a real estate deal, and we have done I would say we've done a hedge fund opportunity, a distressed corporate credit fund, a debt fund. So we've been busy.
Wow, yeah, that is very diverse investments that you have, portfolio that you have there. Yeah, just one follow-up questions on the multi-family office. Do you have to adhere to each of the family inside, or do you have sort of a general investment strategy for the entire fund?
So we are not a fund, just to clarify. So we are not a fund. So we operate as the family office professionals for our families, right? And so when we look at an opportunity and we see a lot of deal flow, we assess what is the best opportunity at the time for the families. And when we see a fit, we internally, that's our process, we do our diligence, our due diligence, internal due diligence, and then we get it through our internal investment committee. And once it passes our IC committee, then we have a conversation with each one of our families on why this is the right opportunity for them. And each family has the option of opting in or out. And it's their decision at the end of the day.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot.
And then the more families opt in, the larger the total allocation for our group into that deal.
Yeah.
So that's where we're different. We're not a fund.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I think your experience here is very interesting. And how does that differ from the experience that you had at Mark Cuban before?
So very different. We were a direct investor at the Cuban Companies. We worked mainly at an early stage with seed Series A. What was a lot of fun is we were very hands-on. So we really worked and provided value to the entrepreneurs. And we helped also internally provide a platform to support them on operationally to accelerate growth, and then eventually also as they get to different stages to help them either raise more capital or find a strategic partner to acquire them. So it's the whole range of services just to empower the entrepreneur on their journey all the way to an exit, if that's what they are looking for. And we get exposure to different sectors, which was great. In my current role, we do direct investments, but we don't do as many. So it's more diversified since, as I explained earlier, we also invest in managers. Now, what we do is we try to, internally, I'm trying to build the same platform of support. The difference here is we have internal platforms not just for some of the investments, the strategic partners we make, but also for our client families. So we're building and using technology to provide a better, more transparency, better tools, and better reporting for our families, client families, and for our other co-investors. And so that's a different strategy and focus right now. So we're still hands-on, but it's we have almost like we have more clients or more touch points at Legacy Night than at the Cuban Companies, which is more working directly with the entrepreneurs.
Yep. Yeah. Spanning various stages. Yep. Yeah. So, mentioned you invested in a lot of company before. So, what are the factors that you look at first when evaluating a company or a startup?
So it all depends on the stage. So when you're looking at a company at a seed, like at a seed or a Series A stage, completely different than a B, C, or D. But let's look at the Seed A founding at kind of the founding early stage. Basically, what we look for is, it really is all about the entrepreneur at that stage. It's about the entrepreneur, because that's what you're betting on as an investor. You're betting on the entrepreneur's vision and their ability to execute on that strategy, which is very important. So that's why the founding team is very important. So if you have a visionary, ideally you want someone to complement the visionary founder, complement, he or she with at someone who's a little bit more technical, and kind of have the best co-founding team to execute on the strategy. You also need to make sure that the founders understand how to monetize on their strategy. So taking that vision, putting it together into a product or service, or kind of productizing it, finding the right way to push that product to a marketplace. So finding the right customer, right? And the most challenging thing at that time, at this stage, is really to figure out, how do you monetize it? How do you price your product, your service? I mean, the easy way is, if you want to compare yourself to your competition, that could be one way. But then again, do you really understand your cost, right? So let's say you're pricing a product or service at a certain point. What are your true costs? And have you really captured everything it takes to deliver that product in the short term, and obviously in the long term? Do you have economies of scale there? You need to be able to dig in and understand every aspect of your business, today and tomorrow. The other thing that you have to look for is, when entrepreneurs build out those models and projections, it's important to understand, obviously these are all projections, but to have an understanding on what are the variables used to create those projections. Not just, all right, year one, we have $50,000 in sales. In year two, we're going to be at 500,000. Year three is going to be $20 million. Well, whoa, wait a second. How do you jump from 500,000 to 20 million? You got to explain that, right? I'm not saying it can't happen. It's rare, but if it's going to happen, show me how, and how are you going to get there, and how much money you're going to need, and what's the team going to look like in that year, right? What's your market? Are you adding more products? So there's a lot of things you have to look at that stage. But to sum it up, what you're really looking at is the entrepreneur's ability to execute on the strategy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And how would that be different in a later stage investment?
So later stage is, so at a later stage, they validate the model. So the entrepreneur has done a good job in executing on a strategy, building the product, and getting excitement not just from the customers, but also from his investors, and has achieved certain goals. Now, there are two types of later stage opportunities to look at. One is an opportunity that is built momentum, but is burning cash like crazy. So when you look at that as an investor, you're saying, well, they're burning a lot of cash. What other value have they built? Can they keep building that momentum and that traction? I mean, you got to quantify the value of that traction, right? I mean, everyone throws out data. And there's a lot of value around data. There's a lot of value around engagement. But at a certain point, you know, what is that value, and is it worth the money that they're asking for, right? And same point there is, now that this entrepreneur has taken the company, or entrepreneurs have taken the company from the A to the C round, right? Can this entrepreneur, does he or she have the skill set to take it from a C all the way to an IPO or to an acquisition? Sometimes they actually they have the ability and the resilience and the kind of the skill that they've earned over time, and to continue on that trajectory. And we've seen a lot of entrepreneurs who have made it through that journey, but there's some who just don't have that skill set, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's where you have to really work with your investors and advisors and say, for the best, what's best for the company right now is if we hire a certain type of individual where, let's say, she can take this company from the C round to an IPO, and I will support her all the way, right? So those are the things that you look at. Still, focus on the entrepreneur, look at the business model, and look at the strategy for growth. So what are they going to do for additional growth? What other products and markets they're going to add? And how much money are they going to spend? Because that's where you really see additional dollars being spent on sales and marketing to really start hitting those bigger milestones. Because now that you've already kind of hit a lot of the early milestones, now it's about true growth versus product and market validation, right?
That's right. Wow, thank you for the insights. I think that's a lot of entrepreneurs today on the call today would find it very interesting and very insightful. So coming back to, you know, the your experience. So you had invested in a lot of company before. So could you share with us some of the most interesting company that you have invested in before?
Yes. So there's we've invested in a lot of companies. I think the most interesting ones are companies that have that at their core want to change the world for good. You've heard about social impact organization, impact investing, ESG. These are a lot of buzzwords, but there's a lot of companies that are true to their mission, and they continue on that path, and they make a business that really does make a difference in this world. But in addition to that, they make a business that can scale and is a for-profit business. And I think that's the best combination, because what you're doing as a business when you grow, I mean, entrepreneurs, when they have a vision and they put it in place and they manifest it, that growth creates jobs, and those jobs create abundance and opportunities for their employees. In addition, obviously, they're creating value of some sort to all of their consumers. But if they can wrap all of that and meet certain impact initiatives, doesn't matter. I mean, it could be a number of things that they could set internally as their goals. Either it's a diversity, or it could be an environmental initiative, sustainability initiative, could be based on governance and transparency. I think it's important to have those goals and to have those as part of the DNA of the firm early on. And I think those are the best companies to invest in.
Gotcha. I think, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So in terms of, just dig a little bit deeper into that. How about the other side of the story? Do you have any regrets for a company that you did not invest in, and why?
So there's a lot. I mean, as an investor, you pass on a lot of deals. And so you always look back and say, we missed on that deal, right? Yeah. But I'm going to give you a great story on one of the biggest misses, especially for the Shark Tank out there, fans out there. So there's one company that was on Shark Tank that all of the sharks missed on. Company was called Doorbot at the time. And basically it's a doorbell with a camera that connects to your phone. And all the sharks said, no, this will never work. Who's going to buy that? So they said no. The entrepreneur, Jamie Siminoff, didn't give up, was resilient, which is another quality you look for an entrepreneur. He eventually found other investors to invest in his company, and the company eventually got renamed as Ring, and Amazon bought them for over $1 billion. So the product that a lot of you watching now probably have as your doorbell that you bought from Amazon under the name Ring that was initially a product that was pitched on Shark Tank. That was one of the biggest misses, yeah.
That's a pretty interesting story. Yeah, and I'm glad that worked out for Jimmy.
Exactly. And actually, what's interesting is I think 2 years ago, the Shark Tank producers brought him back as a guest shark. So
what a biggest irony.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, let's just jumping back, to the higher level pictures. This year has been very interesting years, to say the least. There's a lot of disruptions by COVID-19. So I'm just curious, is there any trends? Is there anything that's happening on your mind? Is there anything that you have been watching for this year?
So this year is a year with a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
So it's tough to look for certainty in this new reality. So you have to keep shifting, and so there are two things. You got to keep learning about what other people are doing out there, other technologies that are being built, because typically in these phases of uncertainty where there's an economic downturn, you're going to see the beginnings of new innovations. So this is a great opportunity, way I see it, for entrepreneurs to start businesses, because this is going to be the next wave of Googles and Facebooks. And that's what kind of Mark usually says, that is they're going to be born within this unique time frame where there's so much chaos and uncertainty. But the next Facebooks and Googles are going to be born today. So encourage entrepreneurs who have an idea and see a problem and have a unique way to disrupt how it's currently being done. Just go for it. That journey is not an easy one, but it's definitely a rewarding one. So, and I definitely recommend everyone out there to experience the journey of an entrepreneur. And this is the best time to do it. This is the best time to start and think about what can you do today to change the future. Doesn't have to be, $1 billion idea. $100 million idea is good enough. A $10 million idea is good. So just as long as you're creating value, go for it.
Yeah, yeah, especially and values is what exactly what we need in this kind of work. And you kind of touched on this a little bit, some of your advice for entrepreneur out there. And I know that on this call, there's going to be a lot of entrepreneur right now and also aspiring entrepreneurs. So to, those entrepreneurs out there, if you have a few advice for them, what would they be?
So this is the best time to become entrepreneurs, right? First,
Yeah.
There's so many different um, tools out there for entrepreneurs that it's right now. I mean, we really are blessed. You can go on the internet, you can learn so much and a lot of rich information that's current that will really empower a new entrepreneur to have a very solid understanding of kind of the journey, right? And then it's really, you have to, the next step would be to really figure out what you want to do, right? What is the business model? What are you trying to fix or solve or change? Is it something that you've experienced that, or is it kind of a pain point that has triggered this initiative, or is it kind of a collective group of entrepreneur or co-founders, and you all kind of have come together and you want to solve this big problem? Whatever it is, I think right now there's so much information out there. But so that's phase one, is really educate yourself on the process, educate yourself on kind of what are the opportunities out there to start from the basics, setting up a business officially, to having a bank account, right? To having a website. But then the more important things, these are all the basics, is really defining what is your business going to be, right? Is it a product or a service? And then start surrounding yourself with experts. We in this networked economy, I think take advantage of the tools. I think I would encourage everyone to definitely have a profile on LinkedIn, polish up your LinkedIn profile, and start connecting with potential mentors or potential investors. Approach everybody as a mentor, would be my advice. And just ask, and it's more difficult in today's world to have a face-to-face, but it does expand your reach, and people are actually more willing to virtually connect via Zoom and just learn from them, ask them questions about, this is my idea, based on your experience and your expertise in this field. Can you give me some some pointers on my technology or my marketing or kind of my growth strategy, or I need access to certain strategic clients that are within your network. What's the best way to approach them? There's so many ways you can do this. And so I would definitely advise, as part of the phase two, is really start connecting yourself with a lot of people that could support you as mentors, advisors. And it would really help you fine tune your business model and your business. And then another, I think, valuable thing is look locally, connect locally with other entrepreneurial networks or accelerators or business accelerators for first-time entrepreneurs are great, especially if they fit within your sector. So like in Dallas, there's several, there's like a sports business accelerator, there's a technology accelerator. If you want to really practice pitches, participate in business plan competitions, the more exposure you have, the more practice and preparation kind of you're being forced to do to improve your elevator pitch, if you want to call it. To think a lot about the approach, the model, why you want to connect with investors. What are you going to do with the money at this stage, right? That's a very important question. Somebody gives you $1 million check today. how are you going to spend it? Show me over the next 2 years, how are you going to spend $1 million? And how are you going to hit all these milestones? And then what? What are you going to do when you hit the milestones? How much are you going to raise then? And what valuation? So money, valuation, a lot of questions that are very subjective at an early stage, where getting the right advice from the right people can really help make you kind of stand out from the crowd of other entrepreneurs that are not doing their homework and are not as prepared as you are. So when you are well polished and you're at a point where you really are ready to go and raise money and sit with an experienced investor, you have a better chance of selling them on what you're doing and getting them in as a partner.
Yeah, I think those are great advice. You know, it's like to a lot of entrepreneurs on the call today. You have to do your homework. You have to make sure that you know your business before.
And a lot of those mentors, advisors could eventually become actual mentors, advisors of your company.
Or investor.
Over time, or investors, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I've heard a lot of different story that, you know, it's a long-term relationship as well.
That's right.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions I have for today. I just want to thank you for making the time to, you know, spend your time and giving your, you know, experience and insight to, you know, VietChallenge this year. We are very grateful for that.
Thank you. And I wish maybe next year we can do it in person.
Yep. Yeah. That's good.